Hey, today we're going to be talking about solving equations with variables on both sides. Up until now, we have only looked at equations that have one variable, and that's it. So some of these problems will look very similar once we do our first step. I have outlined 3 different steps that we will do, but really the only new step is step 1, and it is very important. So our instructions say to add or subtract the smallest variable or add or subtract the variable that is not by itself. So to figure out when to do which, you're going to do the smallest variable whenever you have 4 terms. So write this down. It's whenever you have 4 terms. So that means you have 2 terms on one side of the equal sign and 2 terms on the other. You're going to do adding and subtracting the variable that is not by itself whenever you have 3 terms. So that's when you have one term off by itself on one side of the equal sign and then 2 terms on the other. The next 2 steps will look a lot like what we have already done. Sometimes it will just be a 2-step equation, sometimes it'll be a 1-step equation. But we have done a lot of those, so hopefully you'll remember how to do those. This little note says you can actually add or subtract any variable or number you want, but choosing the smallest of each will help avoid having negative numbers. So we don't like negative numbers, so that's why we choose the smallest variable to add or subtract. We will still have some negatives sometimes, but choosing the smallest variable will help us avoid negatives more. So let's look at some examples. Part A, notice we have 3 terms, 7x, 5x, and 6. So 3 terms, it says to add or subtract the variable that is not by itself. So when I say that, 7x is off by itself. 5x is not, it has the 6 by it. So we are going to add or subtract this 5x. So it's kind of similar to when we have our significant other and the friend, except here we're going to get rid of the whole 5x part. So instead of 5x, remember we do the opposite on the opposite side. So instead of positive 5x, we want negative 5x. So negative 5x on the other side. Make sure you line up everything pretty nicely. So 7x minus 5x is 2x. Bring down your equal sign. This 5x goes away. You're just left with 6 on the right. So now I have 2x equals 6. Now this is a simple 1-step equation. It's saying 2 times what is 6. Another way to think about that is to do the opposite. Instead of multiplying by 2, I'm going to do the opposite and divide by 2 on the opposite side. We get x equals 6 divided by 2 is 3. So x equals 3. Remember that you can always check your answer by plugging it back in. 7 times 3 is 21. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 6. 15 plus 6 is 21. We got 21 on both sides, so we're good. X equals 3 is correct. For part B, again we have 1, 2, 3 terms, so we're doing the same thing we did over here. So choose the variable that is not by itself. X is off by itself on the right side. 3x is not by itself because it has this minus 2. So instead of a positive 3x, I want a negative 3x on the other side. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. My 3x goes away, but remember minus and negative, same thing. So this is actually a negative 2. So you want to bring down the whole negative 2. Bring down your equal sign. Also remember that when x is by itself like this, remember there's an invisible 1. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2x. Some people like to switch the problem around so that their x is on the other side, which is good. So I can rewrite this as negative 2x equals negative 2. And again, this is just a 1-step equation. So instead of multiplying by negative 2, I will divide by negative 2 to get x equals negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1. So x equals 1. And again, you can check it. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 2 is 1. And then if I just plug in x equals 1, that's 1. So we get 1 on both sides. Now the next part's where it gets pretty tricky. So if you need to stop the video and talk about it, that's fine. For part C, I have 4 terms. remember in my step 1 I said if I had 4 terms, I'm going to choose the smallest variable. So I have 2x and I have x. Well, x is my smallest because that's just a 1 in front compared to 2, 1 smaller than 2. Now this is a positive 1x, so the opposite is negative. Now remember that you can only add or subtract like terms, which means I am only going to put this 1x under this 2x. So instead of positive 1x, I'll subtract 1x over here. Make sure you line everything up pretty well. So remember to just put your variables with your variables. You cannot put it by the 4 because they're not like terms. So make sure you're putting your like terms together. 2x minus 1x is just plain x. It's 1x, but we don't need the 1, so I'm just putting x. Bring down your plus 4. Bring down your equal sign. This goes away because we subtracted it over here, and we're left with 6. Now this is another one-step equation. So we're thinking what plus 4 equals 6? Well, we know that that's 2, but that show our work. Instead of plus 4, we're going to subtract 4 to get x equals 2. That's going to be my answer. So remember to start with your smallest variable to avoid the negatives, and remember to line up your variables. Don't put your variable underneath the 4 or the 6. You always go to the opposite side and put your like terms together. So that's like another. Part D, we have 4 terms again. So we choose our smallest variable. We have 4x and we have x. So again, x is my smallest because that's just 1 compared to 4. And again, it's a positive 1x. So on the opposite side, I'm going to subtract it by my x. So the reason I subtracted is because this is a positive x. The opposite of positive is a negative. So I wrote a negative x down here. But remember, negative minus, same thing. And remember, I put it underneath my 4x because I have to put my like terms together. So I put my x's by my x's. So now I go down the line, I got a 9. Then I have 4x minus 1x, which is a positive 3x. So I write plus 3x. Bring down the equal sign. This x goes away. I'm left with 6. Now this is a two-step equation, but we know how to do these. Remember to get rid of your friend and then get rid of your significant other. So my friend here is 9. So instead of positive 9, I'm going to subtract 9. We get 3x equals 6 minus 9 is negative 3. Instead of multiplying by 3, I will divide by 3 to get x equals negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. So my answer is x equals negative 1. For part E, again I have 4 terms, so I'm choosing my smallest variable. Now this is a little tricky because there are minuses in front. Remember, that's a negative. So I have negative 1x compared to negative 3x. Negative 3 is actually smaller than negative 1, so this is the variable I want to choose. However, remember, if you accidentally choose the wrong variable, it's okay. You can still get the right answer. You just might have to deal with some more negatives than the person next to you. So I have my minus 3x. Instead of a minus 3x, I'm going to add 3x on the other side. So remember, I'm adding it because this was minus. Do the opposite, add. And I lined it up with my x's because I want my like terms together. So over here I have a 3. Negative 1 plus 3, that's the same thing as 3 minus 1. So that's going to give me 2x, so plus 2x. Bring down your equal sign, bring down your 5, and this went away because we added it to the other side. And again, we have a two-step equation, so get rid of the friend, so that's my 3. Instead of a positive 3, I want the opposite, subtract 3 on the other side. So I get 2x equals 5 minus 3 is 2. And then instead of multiplying by 2, I'm going to divide by 2 to get x equals 2 divided by 2 is 1. Next, for part F, we have 4 terms again. So again, I'm going to choose my smallest variable. So I have a positive 1x and I have a negative 1x. So obviously negative is smaller, so this is the variable I want. Instead of a minus 1x, I'm going to do the opposite and add 1x to the other side. So remember to line up your like terms, so we lined up our x's. I have a negative 6, and then I have 1x plus 1x, which is a positive 2x, so plus 2x. Bring down your equal sign, and then your negative 8, and then this goes away. Again, we have a two-step equation. My friend is right here, so instead of a negative 6, the opposite of that is a positive 6. So I'm going to write positive 6 on the opposite side. That goes away, so I'm left with 2x equals negative 8 plus 6 is a negative 2. And I'm going to divide by 2 to get x equals negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So x equals negative 1. I must have liked ones when I was making this. Okay, we got two more left. For part G, again we have 4 terms to deal with. So we are choosing our smallest variable. Here I have a positive 1x and I have a negative 1x. So very similar to part F. My negative 1x is smaller. So instead of negative 1x, I'm going to add it to the other side. Remember to line up your like terms, so put your x's with your x's. On the left, I have a negative 6. I have 1x plus 1x is 2x again. Then equals, this goes away. I'm left with a negative 16. So don't forget your negatives. They go with the problem. This is my friend again. So instead of negative 6, I'm going to opposite and add 6 to get 2x equals negative 16 plus 6 is a negative 10. Instead of multiplying by 2, do the opposite and divide by 2 to get x equals negative 10 divided by 2 is a negative 5. For part H, again we have 4 terms, so we choose the smallest variable. I have 2x compared to a negative 1x, so this one is smaller. Instead of a negative x, the opposite of that is a positive x. So I'm going to write positive x on the other side, and you can put your 1 there if you want. Remember, I put my x's with my x's, so that's why I lined it up that way. 2x plus 1x equals 3x. Bring down your plus 8 equals, this goes away. I'm left with a negative 1. So again, don't forget to bring down your negative. And again, we have a two-step equation now. So get rid of your friend, which in this case is the 8. Instead of plus 8, we will minus 8 on the other side. To get 3x equals negative 1 minus 8 is negative 9. Then instead of multiplying by 3, do the opposite and divide by 3. To get x equals negative 9 divided by 3 is a negative 3. So x equals negative 3. So like I said at the beginning, this is very similar to what we have already done. The main difference is at the beginning where you have to add or subtract a variable. And again, it doesn't really matter which variable you choose, but the two ways that I told you, one choosing the smallest variable and the other choosing the variable that's not by itself, will help you avoid negatives and make your problem a little bit shorter. So I'm going to post this video to my class website, so if you want to rewatch it you can, or you can email me with any questions that you have, because I know it's a more difficult topic. So again, if you have any questions, just let me know.